He comes home early because of a whim, an old box of ornaments left at the office, a file he can't sleep with, the sudden urge to see his wife before Christmas morning. The driveway crunches under his boots. The mansion looks smaller in the snow, all lights and glass and the hush of other people's lives. He hangs his coat on a brass hook, runs his fingers over the familiar grain, thinks for a split second how small a place a house becomes at night when the people inside turn their faces away. A door opens a fraction. Light slants through. He steps forward, intending a laugh, a hand on the shoulder, a surprise he expects will be shared and warm. Instead, a hand clamps over his mouth. Fingers are quick, certain. Breath turns to a startled fog on his own face. A woman's voice, low as falling snow, breathes into his ear. "Stay quiet." He freezes. The world reduces to the dark cavity of a closet, to the thud of his own heart, to that single command. He smells fabric, linen, starch, and another faint thing beneath, bitter and chemical, like a medicine gone wrong. Through the crack of the closet door he sees the dining room, crystal catching lamplight, the tree in the corner with a single ornament set aside, the bottle of green juice on a tray, beads of condensation trembling on its glass, like hidden promises. Lauren is there, all laughter folded away. Evan stands close, too close, their voices a shuffle of soft voices and the small sounds of a plan that has no place under carols. "They doubled it," Lauren says, as if reciting something necessary and ordinary. "He'll sleep by 9. No one will notice." Raphael's mouth aches from being held shut. He struggles against the hand and tries to move, slow and careful, to avoid snapping the small life of this lie into something noisier. The hand is steady. Cynthia's eyes meet his in the dim slit, the woman who has dusted his trophies, who knows the footsteps of every room, who moves through the house like a shadow made small by service. Her pupils are iron. She is young enough to tire and old enough to keep promises. She had been there the whole evening, smoothing his cuffs away from the juice, offering a second glass, smiling with a servility that hides the clench of worry behind her jaw. "Stay quiet," she whispers again, softer this time, and with every syllable she makes a plan in the space between his breath and the wood of the closet, a plan that will not allow the night to end the way it is meant to. Through that thin crack he hears the rest. Lauren's voice is cold, practiced. "We can't risk anything tomorrow. The board will see him, the cameras, the public. We do it tonight. No witnesses. Evan, call Miles. Make sure he waits out back." Raphael feels the world tilt. Betrayal is a simple geometry. The people closest make a line that can cut you. He had imagined threats would come from strangers, rivals, lawsuits, the kind of greed that sits in corporate towers and sends lawyers. He had not thought to weigh how heavy a wife's smile could be when set to murder. Cynthia leans toward the crack and listens. The maid who keeps the house in order is listening to the language of a plot. Her face does not betray the terror she must feel. She has feet that know every creak, hands that have hidden away silver for nights like this, eyes that have watched children groan and fall ill. She has something else. A small Ziploc bag folded into the seam of her apron, where earlier that week she'd scooped up a suspicious white scrap from the trash, a scrap that tasted of the same bitterness she now smells in the room. She had kept it, because she remembers losing a brother to a medicine that was cheaper than it should have been, because sometimes the people at the bottom collect danger like lint, and sometimes they keep it until it's time to use it. "Stay with me," she breathes to Raphael. Her voice is a map. He nods, which feels like a betrayal of his pride, but not of his will to live. They wait until the conversation distills into the ordinary noise of a household, the clink of cutlery, Lauren's soft goodbye to Evan, the click of a door. Cynthia times it like she times everything, by the pattern of footsteps and the way the house inhales. When the corridor empties, she moves. She does not move like a servant bolting. There is no slapdash in her motion. She gathers him, his jacket, a scarf, an old cap, and presses his face close to hers, so the breath she gives is another commandment. "Don't make a sound." She covers his mouth with a hand that has steadied infants and held the hands of dying pets. It is the same hand that has put away receipts and smoothed the sheet over his father's deathbed. Tonight, it is a shield. They slip through service passages that smell of lemon polish and old roses. Cynthia navigates the staff entrance with the expertise of one who has been in other people's houses for a long time. She knows where the cameras have blind spots, which delivery doors are rarely inspected, which fence post has a loose slat that won't squeal if moved. She does not pause to explain. He has no right to her explanation, only to the soft certainty that someone has put him before their own safety. Outside, snow muffles their steps. The mansion hovers in the background like a threat in a Christmas card. Illuminated windows, the promise of safety that is now a lie. Cynthia stops at the iron gate and does the first ugly thing. She takes his phone and his watch, and she breaks them against the stone. The sound is muted, plastic against granite. A little crack, the surrender of a world that tracks you. She drops the pieces into the nearest trash bin and shoves the bin behind a hedge, small acts that will make the night's movement harder to reconstruct. She doesn't name what she is doing. She has spent years knowing which tools sell people's lives back to them. Tonight she is determined that technology will not be their betrayer. They walk. Two people crossed in their fortunes past sleeping cars and the dim rectangle of a holiday wreath toward a different quiet. Cynthia's apartment is a strip of light further down the block, an upstairs flat with a tiny tree in the window and stockings taped to the radiator. The tree is modest, one ornament missing here, one string of lights that flickers on the third bulb only, but it glows like a small hearth. Inside, the air is warm with the smell of something simmering. Someone has been baking. There is a moth-eaten couch, a pile of folded uniforms, the outline of the life that people do not see in mansions. He sits on the couch and feels suddenly undressed by the intimacy of her home. There is no valet, no assistant, no person at the door to unlock the world. There is only Cynthia, who hands him a blanket and presses cool cloth to his forehead. She speaks quietly while she works, not to explain, but because silence is itself an enemy. "You should have called me when you left," she says, irritation thin with relief. "You should have known not to come in without telling anyone." He laughs softly, a sound like a man waking from anesthesia. The laugh contains more than confusion. It contains the first stirrings of shame. "I thought," he begins and stops. It is almost funny, a man of his means assuming he was safe because he had everything money bought. He had not accounted for the small, precise violences of intimate betrayal. Cynthia's hands are efficient as she tends him. She makes tea, the kind that tastes of rooibos and cinnamon, and presses his hand like a nurse who has kept her temper through long shifts. When he asks how she knew, she does not look surprised. "I found something in the bin last Tuesday," she says, voice steady. "A scrap of powder stuck to the plastic. I kept it because it didn't look like anything the house uses. I thought that if something happened, I'd know why." Her eyes hold a quiet that is not resignation but a memory of loss. "My brother trusted the wrong doctor once. They called it care. He died because someone somewhere thought saving a little money was worth a life." The words are plain and they do not ask for pity. They underline motive like chalk under handwriting. Outside, a car idles by the curb, an ordinary occurrence on a holiday night. Inside, a neighbor knocks at the door. Mrs. Parker, an elderly woman who runs downstairs to borrow sugar and gossip. Cynthia hunches, listening. The knock is a flint-striking fear in the already tender skin of the night. She peeks out the curtain and sees the neighbor, a shawl over her shoulders, wind knocking at her hat. Mrs. Parker smiles and waves, her face a loose map of good intentions. Cynthia opens for her with a careful smile. "Everything okay?" Mrs. Parker asks, eyes flicking at the wrapped box on the table, a present with a red bow and a card addressed in Lauren's familiar hand. "Everything's fine," Cynthia says. The lie is a balm. Mrs. Parker lingers, and Cynthia hands her a plate of cookies with a thank you that is a small island of civility. The knock could have been a trap. It could have been a blessing. It is simply the world continuing, indifferent to the dramas of other lives. In the morning, sunlight finds Raphael feverish and lucid by turns. He is ashamed of the sleep his body takes. He looks at Cynthia and sees not just the woman who saved him, but the life she has been born to, a life that knows how to move silently in other people's chaos. He wants to say thank you in a way that reaches beyond words. He tries, "I will repay you," but the phrase feels like a bauble, something bright, but fragile. "You don't have to," Cynthia says. "Do what you can. Keep yourself alive. Somehow that's payment enough." Her voice is not pleading. It is a ledger kept with a stern hand. They go to Pastor James because a place of refuge is not only about shelter, but about the kind of listening that does not carry judgment. Pastor James opens his church as a man opens his home, with keys under the mat for those who have been pushed out of other doors. The church is warm and smells of wax and stale coffee. Christmas banners hang like soft flags above pews that have seen confessions and quiet decisions. He listens, palms folded over each other like a patient guardian. Pastor James knows how to hold danger without shouting it into panic. He hears the story and lets it settle. "We will not run ahead of truth," he says, choosing his words for weight. "We will not go to the police until we are sure." There is a conviction in his calm. Truth must be assembled, not claimed. Cynthia pulls out the scrap of evidence from the seam of her apron. The ziplock looks almost pathetic in the gleam of the church lights, a sliver of white folded into itself. Pastor James takes it gently, as if holding a fragile bird. He does not pretend to understand the science. He knows, however, that the chain of proof is a thing that will convince men in suits, not just people with a heart. Enter Nurse Kayla, the first professional to enter their circle. She arrives wearing an ordinary coat and a face like someone who has seen the thin edges of death and come back arguing with it. When she looks at the scrap, she doesn't say the words that might make a man collapse in gratitude. She says, "We need a test, the practical antidote to melodrama." Her testing is not the kind of glossy forensic show on a screen. It is small and human. A cotton swab here, a drop of Raphael's blood there, a strip of paper that changes color like an old-fashioned pH test, but far more discreet. She is careful, not theatrical. She doesn't declare verdicts. She murmurs, "This shows traces of a substance that will act slowly. It can concentrate, it can be lethal if the dose is enough." The word lethal lands like a bell. Nothing explicit, no specifics, only a clear recognition of intent. Nurse Kayla's tests are not infallible, they are initial, but they are enough to tip the scale from suspicion to action. She explains in a tone that doesn't overpromise, "If we want to make this stick, we need something more solid. Video, a recording, proof that connects the action to the actors, a paper trail." The pieces begin to align. Memory reconstructs itself not as an explosion, but as a mosaic. The green juice, the doubled dose, the casual care that read as murder. Raphael realizes, with a kind of cold clarity, that his life had been narrowed to a thin string by people who expected him to be predictable, by a wife who hated exposure, by a brother who wanted inheritance before his hour. He thinks of his father, of the board lunches, of the phone calls that seemed always timed. He thinks too of Cynthia's steady hands, and the way she would hide small kindnesses in the folds of her apron. They make a plan that is careful because haste could be fatal. No one suggests hurling accusations at a holiday party. No one wants to trigger an arrest that will scatter evidence and let clever lawyers turn their truth into noise. Pastor James speaks of the need for incontrovertible material, something that will make the federal agent listen and act. Nurse Kayla names the one thing they need, the backup drive from Raphael's office, a small device that the mansion's IT team uses to store surveillance footage. If the cameras have turned, if someone has added a second recording to mask what they did, the backup drive will show the difference. It will show who touched the tray, who poured the juice, who lingered by the green bottle when no one was looking. "How do we get it?" Raphael asks, the practical question of a man who has always solved problems by making calls. He pictures security, the alarms, the men who guard his doors like a second family. He is not naive. He has enough money to hire fleets and armies. But money is useless against inside knowledge that chooses to remain a secret. Cynthia sets her jaw. "We go when it's least expected," she says. Her plan is not a manual, it is a choice. We return quietly. We take the drive. We let Kayla verify it outside. We bring it to someone who carries weight, someone at the level that can arrest without local politics stepping in. We do this with one move and with evidence that cannot be argued away. Pastor James nods. His face carries a moral gravity that steadies them. "We will not be cowards in the face of truth," he says, "but we will be wise." He calls a contact, a friend who owes him a favor at the right level of authority, someone who can make a federal ear attentive. The word does not go out yet. It sits like coal under ash. They will not let sparks fly until they know their hands are clean. Raphael feels the old arrogance thinned by fear. He has always believed that wealth insulated him. It does not. He feels guilty for the life that allowed Lauren and Evan to think the board's whispers could drown any moral compass. He thinks of the charity events where he smiled at donors and promised change, not knowing his own inner circle planned for his silence. Cynthia is not naive about the world she is entering. She knows the risk is not only that they will be caught. The risk is that exposure could strip her of more, the job that feeds her family, the quiet dignity of the life she has carved. She thinks of her brother again, of small savings spent on a final medicine that turned out to be a compromise. Her courage tonight is partly redress. It is a promise that if another family is trying to hide murder in fancy packaging, someone will notice. They rehearse the plan in whispers. Night will be their ally. The mansion staff will be asleep or at the Christmas party. They will use the old service corridor, the one that runs behind the drawing rooms. Cynthia knows the staff routine, which night watch is lazy, which door sticks, which janitor drinks too much on holidays. She knows where to stand, so the cameras feel she is only a presence moving about the house. She also knows where to look for the safe, behind a painting, under a false bottom in the desk, places men of wealth prefer because they believe their money is cleverer than thieves. "You can get in there," she says, as if naming a small truth. "You can get what you need. But if anything goes wrong, we run to the church. We do not call anyone until the drive is verified. The wrong arrest scatters evidence." Raphael swallows. He thinks of the charity gala in 3 days, his public face, the microphone, the speech about giving. He thinks of Lauren standing before his donors with false concern, like an actor in a morality play. He imagines her face when the cameras that watch her cup her hands and whisper are turned back on her. He feels the old hunger for justice prick awake. The morning light blanches the snow outside. The tree outside Cynthia's window shivers in the breeze. They take inventory. The scrap in the ziplock, the swab sealed in a small envelope, Nurse Kayla's note about concentration, Pastor James's promise of a federal contact, and Cynthia's personal knowledge of the mansion's mazes. They are not many. They feel like pilgrims with a map scribbled in the margins. A call comes in the afternoon that tightens everything. A car is at the gate, not the sort of car that visits for holiday cheer. It's the dark sedan the household recognizes, Captain Miles. He is a man in a uniform of convenience, used to making complications vanish quietly. He answers to a number of people and not always to law. Cynthia's mouth goes tight. "He takes orders from Lauren," she says. The implication is slow and ugly. If Miles is in Lauren's pocket, then official channels are a blind corridor. They cannot rely on the usual routes of justice. Pastor James's contact is patient and precise. He will listen, but only when they have rock-solid proof. "Bring him the drive," the voice on the other line says, "and I'll be there. He will not move without the footage." It is the cooling of a fever. Matthew, the contact, will act only on what cannot be denied. They prep for the night with the care of people who know how fragile courage can be. Cynthia borrows a scarf from Mrs. Parker to cover Raphael's high collar and tucks in a small flask of something medicinal that is not instructive to the listener, only a comfort, a human touch. Pastor James locks the church doors except for the one that faces the alley. Nurse Kayla insists they proceed with caution. Her look says that medicine is not only what saves a body, but also what preserves the moral center of a story. Dusk comes on with a wind that dramatizes the bare branches like a stage prop. They drive back to the mansion in a borrowed van with tinted windows, practicalities that Raphael has never had need of until tonight. The mansion looms as if nothing has changed. Inside, a party is starting in another wing, laughter drifting out like smoke. Lauren is scheduled to speak at a local charity event tomorrow. The irony tightens the chest. The service gate is less guarded than during the day. Cynthia moves like she always moves, efficient, unremarkable. Raphael's hands shake only once on the railing as his past and present rub against each other. He imagines Evan in the corridor pursuing the promise of an inheritance, like a man both greedy and small. He imagines the green bottle on a tray, the double dose in a glass. He imagines the public faces they will show the world tomorrow. They enter through a side door left unlocked by a careless security guard. The staff corridors smell of detergents and warm linens. Cynthia is a ghost among them. She lifts a panel, slips through an unlit service vestibule, and finds the pathway she has memorized for him, left by the pantry behind the wine cellar, a narrow stair that brings them to the study where Raphael keeps a desk the size of a small island. The safe is where men hide things they never plan to part with, documents, keepsakes, and tonight, perhaps the backup drive that looks like any other small device to those who don't know where to look. Cynthia kneels by a rug and listens to the house. Raphael watches her, his usual grip on authority dissolved into gratitude and fear. His eyes track her hands as they find the secret place where the painting shifts and a panel slides. The world contracts to the click of a cover and the low mutter of breath. She extracts the drive without flourish. It's small, unassuming, a thing meant to be invisible until needed. It fits in her palm like a different life. For a moment, everything stops. The heavy, suspended time before either triumph or catastrophe. Their mission seems absurd in its simplicity and terrifying in its consequences. Then a floorboard groans, a note like an accusation. Someone has come back early. The sound is small but exact. They freeze. The mansion breathes, and in its lungs is an extra person, a return that tastes like armistice but smells like danger. Raphael feels the old world pull tight. Lauren's voice might be in the corridor. Evan's might be a laugh. They have less than a breath to decide. Cynthia presses the drive against her chest and looks up at Raphael with a ferocity that has been hard-earned. If they find us, run to the garden. Go left past the fountain. I will meet you at the little gate. She speaks not as someone giving orders, but as someone who has learned exact latitude in the geometry of escape. He has no time to argue. He nods like a man going to a battle he didn't choose. They move. The study door opens a sliver, and a silhouette fills the frame. Evan, unsteady, perhaps tipsy from the party, or perhaps on purpose. He blinks at the two of them in his private room. For a second, recognition is a slow thing, a dawning. His eyes fall on Cynthia, then on the small device in her hand like a good luck charm. "Late night," he says, with a casualness that is a blade. His voice is cushioned by the house, calm as a man who thinks himself owed. Raphael stands, the tallest man in the room suddenly shrunken by the intimacy of discovery. "We," he begins. The sentence stalls into the air. Outside, glass tinkles as someone elsewhere toasts to a good season. Inside, the world has become a tight knot. Cynthia steps forward not to fight but to buy time. Her hands are empty now but for the drive, which she hides like a secret in the fold of her uniform. She speaks to Evan with a politeness that is a thin armor. "We were just looking for a blanket. There's been a draft." Evan smiles the smile of someone used to being read as a script no one need edit. His gaze moves past her to Raphael, with what is almost pity. "You shouldn't be here tonight, it's late." Raphael feels a heat like shame move through him. How many times had he overlooked small signs? When had courtesy become an excuse to be blind? He wants to say so many things and ends up saying none. The drive hums like a heart against Cynthia's ribs. The rest of the night can go any direction. The mansion is full of men who keep secrets. Tonight, those secrets wake and stretch. Cynthia and Raphael step back into the shadows and exit by the kitchen corridor, hearts thudding like trapped birds. They slip past a cluster of catering staff, laughing over a tray of mince pies. For anyone watching, they are two quiet staff members turning to throw away a dish. Outside, the breath of winter is a seal. They run for the fountain as Cynthia instructed, the sound of their shoes a dry percussion on marble. The alley is black. The small gate clicks behind them like a lock on a breath. They are not safe, but they are not captured. In the church that night, Pastor James lays out a version of the road ahead. Verification, then exposure. He will call his contact when Nurse Kayla confirms the footage on the backup drive matches the timeline they fear. "We will do this clean," he says. "We will do this so even those who doubt have to look." There is a gravity in his promise that hangs on the rafters like incense. Nurse Kayla inspects the drive in a neutral room under the pretense of church hospitality. She plugs it into a laptop, careful, like one who handles relics. The footage gardeners had saved, the loop that criminals sometimes use to mask their work, will be the test. If the feed shows what Cynthia saw through the closet crack, then the case is not merely hearsay. It becomes, instead, a small fortress of images, hands pouring, a hand lingering, a cup lifted and set down. The laptop screen shows the study at an earlier hour. Figures move like shadows. The camera catches the way Lauren lingers near the tray. It catches Evan leaving the room as if the deed were done. The footage is a clean thing. It does not shout. It simply exists. It is the kind of evidence federal men respect, objective, repeatable, and indisputable. Nurse Kayla's jaw is blank when she looks up. "This is enough," she says. The words are not triumphant. They are the flat statement of a professional who has turned a possibility into fact. The room is heavy with the realization that what they feared is not imagination, but intent. Pastor James reaches out and takes Raphael's hand in both of his. The grip is an ember that warms a cold chest. "We will bring this to someone who can act without local entanglements," he says. "We will not let the county sheriff be the final voice in this." There is political wariness in his tone. He knows the small circuits of power and has seen them bend before money. Cynthia watches all of this with a sort of quiet that is not peace, but a readiness to move. She is a woman who has been overlooked, and now is the axis of a turning. She thinks of the little tree in her window and the life she keeps. She thinks of a brother gone, and a debt owed not in money but in dignity. She will not allow another family to taste the corruption of safety. They prepare to go public, but they will not do it as vigilantes. They will bring the evidence to a federal agent Pastor James trusts. In the coming hours, arrangements are made like gears set for a clock, a time, a place, the promise that the arrest will happen at the charity event where Lauren will be in the light and where the truth can no longer hide behind smiling faces. The plan is dangerous in a way that feels righteous, to expose the deceit in front of the donors, to end the villainy on a stage meant for generosity. As they leave the church for the night, the bells ring the hour. The sound is like a summons or a benediction. Raphael walks beside Cynthia, and for the first time tonight, he says what he truly means. "Thank you," he says, and the sentence is insufficient. He looks at her and sees more than a maid. He sees the person who chose, in a world that rewards silence, to speak with courage. She shrugs, as if gratitude is a currency she cannot accept. "You live," she replies simply. "That's what matters." The night is long, and the danger sleeps in rooms that will tomorrow pretend innocence. They are not naive enough to believe one night of evidence will instantly fix everything. They only know they have begun the work of making it hard to deny what happened. For a man who has made a life out of constructing towers, the idea that truth comes not from grand gestures, but from tiny acts, keeping a scrap, smashing a device, taking a drive, feels new and old all at once. They do not know yet how the public will react, whether the charity event will end in handcuffs and headlines, or if Lauren and Evan will find loopholes. They only know they have a small fortress now, a drive, a nurse's test, a pastor's network, and a woman who once they epped in the background has stepped to the fore. As Christmas approaches with its bells and ribbons, the first stage of the plan is complete. But the night is only the beginning. The next move will require them to go back into the lion's den, into the mansion where the very chairs have been complicit, and pull out a thread that will unravel a family's carefully constructed lie. Outside snow begins to fall again, each flake a small blanketing that both hides and reveals. Inside, lights glow like eyes. The next steps will be more dangerous than the first. They gather their things in whispers, each step measured. Raphael feels the weight of his mistakes and the strange lightness of being saved by someone he had never expected to trust. Cynthia tucks the drive into the inner pocket of her coat and looks at him with an expression that says she will do what she must, but she will expect change afterward. She remembers her brother's small grave and the promise she made to it. Never again will poverty be language for dying. Tonight she has kept that promise. They leave the church quietly under a sky thin with stars. Somewhere in the town an old radio plays a carol. The melody is a fragile, hopeful thing. It seems incongruous and appropriate all at once, a hymn of giving for a night when truth must be given no matter the cost. They do not speak of the arrest that might come or the consequences that might follow. They only know that to move forward, they must be precise, courageous, and ready to face the public. As they drive away from the sanctuary, the camera of their fate swings between the mansion in the rear view and the tiny tree in Cynthia's window that now feels larger than ever. The narrative has turned. What began as a question of private safety has become a public duty. The world will soon learn that the richest man in town discovered the most dangerous place was not the street, but his own dining room, and that the person who saved him was the one the world had taught to be invisible. Yet there is a moment before action, where fear and resolve balance like scales. Raphael pulls the drive from Cynthia's pocket and turns it over in his hands, as if he could feel the faces behind what it contains. He thinks of Lauren's smile and Evan's careless ambition, and of the party where donors will clap tomorrow, unaware of how close tragedy came. He thinks too of Pastor James's calm and Nurse Kayla's steady eyes. They arrive at the edge of decision. The plan requires one more risk, to bring the drive back into a place where it was hidden in plain sight and where people who thought themselves safe will soon be exposed. They will do it with careful timing and the weight of incontrovertible images. For now, the small victory is the knowledge that they made truth visible to themselves. For now, Cynthia's whisper, "Stay quiet," is a memory that has been turned inside out into a command to act. They prepare to sleep in shifts, to keep watch like sentinels poised before a fragile dawn. Dawn will come with more than light. It will bring the performance of charity, the clinking of crystal, and the possibility of arrest. The plan moves from idea to action. The rest depends on courage, timing, and the refusal of those who own things to believe their wealth can quiet the law. As the van pulls away and the mansion recedes into the night, Raphael looks at Cynthia and asks the question that has been humming beneath everything. Why me? It is not a question about politics or money, but about the human calculus of why some lives are defended and others not. Cynthia's answer is simple and precise. Because you were in front of me, she says, because you could be killed tonight, and because someone has to care enough to do something. Outside, snow settles. Inside, a plan begins to move like a chess piece across a board. The next move will demand the very thing they have been practicing: patience, timing, and a courage that does not ask the world to be grateful, but only to be fair. They keep watch in shifts, two broken sentinels at the edge of a night that has sharpened into a mission. Raphael paces once, twice, then finds that standing is an argument with his guilt. He sits instead, hands folded on his knees, as if prayer can be organized like a meeting. Cynthia naps in a chair with the drive tucked under a cushion, the small thing folded into the ordinary, as if it has always belonged there. Pastor James dozes in a straight-backed pew with a Bible closed under his hand. Nurse Kayla sits by the door, eyes never fully shut, a small thermos of coffee at her feet. They move like conspirators who are not criminals. Their conversation is brief, economical. They recheck the same details because repetition is a way of making certainty out of fear. The federal contact will meet them 3 hours before the charity gala begins. He will not come without the footage, he told Pastor James. He will not move without the corroboration of a professional. That is the promise. They accept the delay not as hindrance, but as discipline. A mistake now would be mercy only for those who deserve to be protected. At dawn, the town wakes with a thin light that makes the snow look like lace. In the van, they go over rolls. Cynthia will be there in the staff area, inconspicuous. Raphael will take his place among donors, as scheduled. He will show up not to speak, but to be seen. Pastor James will sit in the front, conspicuous enough to make those who would think to hide uneasy. Nurse Kayla will be on standby with medical confirmation at hand. The federal agent, Matthew, the pastor's contact, will wait downstairs at the venue with the officer he trusts. They will watch Lauren step into light, and they will watch her hands. The charity hall glitters with goodwill and a stage that seems designed to swallow truth. Donors laugh over roast and wine, their collars loosened by warmth and cheer. A brass band plays a medley. Waiters circulate with trays. Lauren arrives in a dress that is practiced to the angle of camera light. Her smile is a mask fitted to every angle of sympathy and command. People who count on her are oblivious to the gamble of their attention. The same audience that applauds will be the court of public opinion. Raphael walks in with the comfortable gait of a man who belongs. He seats himself and lets the tides of social niceties move around him like a current. Cynthia stands at a service table in the back, a plain coat over the uniform she has worn in houses of more fortune than hers. Her face is calm. The evening has taught her a new kind of stillness. She knows how a room feels when it is about to change. The anticipatory breath, the hush before the announcement. Tonight, the hush has edges like a blade. When Lauren mounts the stage, the light seems to love her. She begins with the expected lines, praise for donors, an anecdote about the charity's work, a laugh that slots like a coin into place. Raphael watches the smile he once trusted and feels the old architecture of his life crack. He imagines the dining room, the green bottle, the gloved hand that night rearranging a life. The drive sits in the inside pocket of his jacket, a small, quiet furnace. They have arranged a moment. Pastor James gives Matthew a nod. Nurse Kayla's hand squeezes Raphael's. Matthew rises, smiling like someone who knows a secret he must reveal politely. He descends the aisle and taps Raphael's shoulder. The movement is small, a discreet signal. Matthew takes the stage not with accusation, but with a presence that claims authority. He does not leap. He unfolds a narrative the way a surgeon opens a map. Precise, unemotional, impossible to deny. "Excuse me," Matthew says into the microphone, and the music stops like someone turning off a light. The room bites into the silence. "We have information that must be heard now." Lauren blinks as if the air has turned frigid. She reads the faces in the first rows and calculates her options. Her composure is professional, honed by years of putting on a front. "This is highly irregular," she says, voice steady. "If this is about—" Matthew holds up a small device, the backup drive, a thing ordinary enough to be overlooked. He does not speak of motives or accusations. He speaks of proof. "We have footage," he says. "We have medical corroboration. We have evidence that shows actions taken in this very house that put a man's life at risk." A murmur ripples. People lean forward. Money buys seats but not immunity from curiosity. Lauren's hand tightens round a glass at the podium. Evan shifts at the side of the room, color leaving his face because the performance he had rehearsed for in private cannot be reconciled with bright light. Matthew steps back, and a federal agent emerges from the side. A man in a plain suit who walks like a man used to giving orders and having them obeyed. He does not shout. He speaks with the bland courtesy of authority. He asks for a private moment with Lauren and Evan, then says, "Ma'am, you are under arrest for attempted murder," in the precise, clean language that turns a rumor into a legal fact. The room exhales like a chorus. Forks clatter on plates. Lauren's first expression is stunned betrayal, the actor of composed charity caught when the script is pulled. Then something harder arrives, calculation. She moves her hands, smooths the dress, tries to craft a new performance. "This is preposterous," she says. "On what basis?" The federal agent's voice shuts her down with a simplicity that makes corners fold closed. "There is footage," he says. "There is independent medical testimony." He gestures for Evan. "You are in handcuffs, sir." Evan does not resist. His face is a map of small petty sorrows, regret arriving when the cost is higher than he imagined. The officers lead him away. Lauren, more clever, turns toward Raphael as if this were a marital temper tantrum rather than a public indictment. The cameras at the event, the phones in the crowd, all find the faces they want. In one sweep, the charity event becomes the site of moral unmasking. Raphael stands. The world has rearranged itself into a clarity that hurts. He walks to the stage and takes the microphone with hands that have been steadied by more than fear. He does not rant. He does not plead. He speaks slowly, as if measuring each syllable against what is owed. "I stood here last year and told a room full of people that giving means more than money," he says. "Tonight I've learned that it also means looking where light doesn't always reach." He turns and faces the crowd, but his eyes find Cynthia in the back. She is there, plain and unadorned, a figure who has crossed the threshold from invisible to essential. He feels a shame so raw, it sharpens into gratitude. She is the one who saved me, he says, voice steady now. Not because of any loyalty to status, but because she saw what others pretended not to. Cynthia saved my life. A silence like a held breath follows. The cameras swivel. People close to Lauren flip through their faces as though seeking an explanation. Some have the foreign look that privilege abruptly meets when it finds itself accountable. Others are simply stunned. Charity in their minds had been a spectacle of generosity, never a stage for crime. Cynthia walks forward, as Raphael's name sits in the room like a claim. She does not march. She moves as one who has been pulled into the light and is meeting it with calm. No one shouts. No one cheers. Recognition is a quieter thing than applause. Raphael steps toward her and takes her hand in both of his. The gesture is not theatrical, it is a reordering. I want the public to know, he says. Not because this makes us noble, but because it keeps someone else from dying in silence. Cynthia risked everything to do what was right. People look at her, and in their faces she reads astonishment, gratitude, an awkwardness at being reminded of the lives that serve them. A donor approaches with tears in his eyes and offers a handshake that is more a benediction. A reporter whispers a question that will become tomorrow's headline. Will she press charges? Will he be compensated? The federal agent answers the practical lines. The investigation will continue. The evidence will be part of a federal case, and those people who are charged will have a chance to defend themselves in court. There is no fanfare in his language, only the cold machinery of law. That is what they wanted. Not vigilante justice, but the kind of justice that does not bend to social pressure. As Lauren is escorted out, she makes one last look at Raphael. It is not remorseful. It is ferocious with calculation. You will regret this, she tells him, voice low. But the audience hears the words and finds them brittle. The arrogance of privilege does not translate into invulnerability when explosives have been replaced by evidence. Outside, the flash of cameras is an odd kind of snow. Raphael walks with Cynthia and Pastor James and Nurse Kayla into the cold and lets the night gather them in. He feels naked in a way no luxurious wardrobe could hide. The truth, once assembled, takes off the masks that money had clumsily stitched on. There are questions to answer. How deep the conspiracy goes, whether Captain Miles will be implicated, whether other silent allies enabled the plot. They will be answered in due course. For the moment, the public arrest is a fulcrum. The wealthy man who had expected safety behind his walls is learning that protection can also come from the hands of those he paid to make life easier. In the days that follow, the small fortress of evidence they assembled becomes both a shield and a spotlight. The police sift through surveillance, the federal agents get warrants, and interviews turn up details that knit Lauren and Evan to a pattern of greed and carefully staged concern. Nurse Kayla's test is repeated in a hospital lab with the proper chain of custody. The results confirm what she first suspected. There were traces of a substance present that matched the scrap Cynthia kept. That match is not a recipe. It's a connection that leaves little room for plausible deniability. Captain Miles is found to have made a series of unrecorded calls that night. His attempts at influence unravel under scrutiny. He had imagined himself a fixer, a man whose favors bought silence. He is now a man whose phone records speak louder than his stories. The system does what it rarely does when confronted with enough proof. It moves. The arrests make headlines. The charity that had planned to bask in the glow of goodwill spends a week defending itself against the stain of proximity. Donors issue statements. Boards reorganize. The public, for a while, tastes the drama of private lives colliding with public generosity. But beneath the spectacle, the real work begins. Accountability, courtroom proceedings, the slow unpeeling of a family that sought to privatize a crime. Cynthia becomes unexpectedly the subject of many conversations. People who had never looked beyond their own tables now look where she lives. Offers appear. A local councilwoman proposes a recognition. A charity reaches out with a check and an offer of job training. Raphael, who once measured his life in balance sheets, measures now in promises he intends to keep. He goes to her flat not as an employer, but as a man who wants to make amends. He kneels where she sits and speaks plainly. "Whatever you want," he says, "name it. I will make it happen." Cynthia looks at him, and then beyond him to the tiny tree in the window and to the memory of a brother's grave. She is not moved by money as a balm. She has what is more rare, an appetite for dignity. "I don't want your pity," she says. "I want a place where I don't have to look over my shoulder. I want to be able to choose, and I want my family, what's left of it, not to have to choose hunger over truth." The words are not a speech. They are exact and practical. Raphael nods. "Then you will have that," he says. He arranges housing and a modest trust for her niece. He makes an open-ended offer, a role in his foundation that will oversee the very buying processes that once hurt her family, someone who can insist on integrity where corners are often cut. It is a small recompense and a big structural change. He knows it is not repentance sealed in one gesture. It is the beginning of an education in humility. The community's response is uneven. Some celebrate Cynthia as a hero. Some make snide comments about scandals on social feeds. That is the reality of public life. Truth is applauded in some corners and resented in others. But the central change is concrete. A family that tried to hide a crime now stands accountable, and a woman who was overlooked is no longer nameless. In a private moment after the arrests, Raphael goes to the small grave where Cynthia's brother is buried with her. He stands awkwardly at the edge while she smooths rosemary over the stone, with hands that remember work and grief as intimate partners. He does not speak. She offers him a look that is not forgiveness granted lightly. "We keep our promises," she says finally, the phrase a small, inexorable law. He folds his hands in a new kind of prayer, not to a liturgy but to the idea of being the kind of man who can keep a vow. The legal proceedings take their time. The criminal justice system stretches forward with interviews and motions and hearings that are somewhere between theatre and slow machinery. Lauren's defense lawyers scramble to find cracks in the case. Evan pleads regret. His voice is the voice of someone surprised to find consequences that historical privilege had blunted. Captain Miles fights the charges of obstruction. The public watches with the fascination of a town that is suddenly aware of the fragility of the line between generosity and greed. Through it all, Cynthia keeps to the quiet dignity that had defined her from the start. She refuses to be paraded, but does not hide when people want to thank her. She visits the hospital, where Nurse Kayla continues to check in on Raphael's recovery. She meets with Pastor James to plan a small community program to teach people how to spot the kind of corner-cutting that cost her brother his life. She speaks softly, but with a steel that will not be mistaken for humility that asks pity. Raphael's recovery is slow but steady. He has learned to look at life differently. There are nights he wakes with the memory of Lauren's voice in the closet and the taste of the bitter thing he never swallowed. He uses that memory not as torment, but as a compass. He steps back from some roles he used to play, redirects the foundation's focus to oversight and transparency, and insists on audits where previously he had said, "Trust me." The changes are small in the ledger, but seismic for those who will benefit from them. Christmas arrives at last with fewer ribbons and more sober gatherings. Cynthia's little tree in the window has a new ornament, one Raphael bought, not ostentatious but deliberate, a glass globe with a tiny painted dove. She hangs it in the very place her brother's photograph could have gone. She is offered a house by Raphael, who is explicit in his terms. No patronizing charity, just a safe envelope, keys, and a trust managed with oversight. She accepts, not as a favor, but as a tool. She takes the job at the foundation, where she scrutinizes contracts and speaks plainly to procurement officers who are unused to being interrupted by someone with her experience. People listen to her more than they ever listen to a report. The arrests lead to trials and a collection of quiet, necessary reckonings. In court, evidence is played, witnesses talk, and the truth that began in a closet is retold with the dryness of process. There are no melodramatic reconciliations. There are verdicts, sentences, and restitution that attempts to stitch what has been torn. The criminal machinery grinds slowly, but reaches conclusions that, for the victims, bring neither closure nor forever healing, just the blunt fairness of the law. Public acknowledgement of Cynthia's role becomes a small corrective in a town that had once preferred invisible help to visible gratitude. A plaque is proposed at the church in Pastor James's name, a modest recognition of the sanctuary he offered. The foundation Raphael sits on changes a few policies and hires more people who understand the world beyond boardrooms. It's not a revolution. It is instead patient repair. Months later, at a community fundraiser that feels different from the one where the arrest happened, a fair with candy canes and a children's choir, Raphael speaks with a clarity that comes from being nearly lost. He tells a story not of shame, but of learning, about the people who stand in houses and sweep and wash and keep odd hours, about the truths they gather that can save or condemn. He does not grandstand. He names Cynthia by her full name, and the room leans in. Sometimes, he says, the person you least expect is the one who chooses courage because they have learned what it costs when courage is absent. If tonight teaches nothing else, let it teach us that we must look for truth in the margins, not only in the spotlight. Cynthia watches him, a small smile a private line. She has not become a symbol so much as someone whose life has shifted enough to show others a path. Kids run past with painted faces. A choir sings a crude but earnest carol. She thinks of her brother, of the small votes of care she took over months to collect the scrap and tuck it away. She thinks of the quiet arithmetic of risk she performed and how that math changed a life. Pastor James prays that evening in the church with a congregation that has learned something about the human cost of corners cut. The prayer is not triumphalist, it is a request for steadiness. Nurse Kayla continues her quiet calls to check on Raphael's blood levels. Never theatrically grateful, simply present. Raphael, still unsteady at times, keeps his gratitude in actions. A scholarship in the foundation's name, a procurement policy with teeth, a promise to make sure that business does not hide harm. The town, after its week of headlines, returns to its daily life. Some things are easier. A woman who had been a nameless helper has a new house and a job that affords her more than security, affords her authority. Some things are harder. The idea that wealth is not immunity, but a responsibility sinks in like a stone that shifts the bottom of a pond. On a quiet evening before the new year, Raphael and Cynthia walk past the mansion together, not as employer and employee, but as two people who had been bound by fear and now travel by choice. They stop where the iron gate once felt like a threat and look at the lights. The mansion is lit as before, but now there is a difference in the air, like a winter that has found a thaw. "Will you ever forgive me?" Raphael asks finally, the words small by design. Cynthia looks at him and then at the night. "Forgiveness isn't a coin I have to hand over," she says. "It's something earned when the world changes enough that what happened doesn't repeat. Keep your promises." He nods. He will. Not because of public pressure, not because of headlines, but because he has learned the cost of indifference. He has learned to listen to the people who notice small dangers and to give them standing to speak without risking everything. The change is modest. It is human. Christmas this year is not a single night, but an ongoing choice. Gifts are given with attention to who makes them possible. The foundation funds the small program Pastor James started, community health checks and legal clinics, things that might prevent another corner from being chosen over a life. The town's conversations shift bit by bit. Gratitude is spoken more often aloud. At a small gathering in Cynthia's new house, where the tree is fuller and the kettle is warm, Raphael raises a cup to the woman who saved him. "To you," he says simply. She smiles and clinks her cup against his. "To the nights we keep watch," she answers. Sometimes the people you overlook are the ones who keep the world safe by doing the small, unpleasant work no one wants to do. Sometimes courage is quiet, a hand over a mouth, a scrap saved, a drive removed from a drawer. Notice them, protect them, give them places where they can live without having to trade silence for safety. This Christmas, a life was spared and a town learned to look. If nothing else, remember to listen in the margins. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that courage isn't always loud. Tell us in the comments, who is someone in your life you might be overlooking, and what can you do to protect them?